Right, people. So I've recently been asked to consult on the issue of late payment penalties, and this seems to be something that we're consulting on more often than we should do. And really, the question is, what's the procedure for dealing with these late payment penalties? Because what happens is, or what seems to be happening, not always, but often it seems, is that taxpayers would, to deal with the penalty for the late payment of VAT typically, they would do an RFR, and SARS will say, no, you can't do an RFR, you must do an objection. And then you do an objection, and SARS says, no, you must do an RFR. Right? And so you often get scenarios, or at least as far as I can see, that effectively what SARS is doing is, by hitting the issue around, is they're refusing to deal with the request for remittance. And I have in the past been forced to say to them, listen, I'm going to bring a High Court application to compel you to consider my request, because what you're doing is you're refusing to entertain a request that I can make in terms of the law. And then often that solves the problem. It's unfortunate that one would have to go that far. But the question still remains is, what is the right procedure? Right, so there's some split views on this. I don't actually know exactly why, because I think it's fairly clear, is when you are disputing a late payment penalty, let's say the late payment of VAT, the correct procedure to follow is to do a request for remittance, and if the decision comes back not to remit, then you can object to that decision. And there's some split views on this, because a penalty assessment is effectively what you're disputing, and what I'm saying is you do it through a remission process, whereas others would say, but it's an assessment, and Section 104 says you can object to an assessment, and there might be some merit to that. But I think the ultimate answer comes to Section 129 of the TAA. And that's the section that says what the tax court can decide. Remember, any dispute that you're lodging against SARS, unless it's a dispute that falls outside the parameters of objection and appeal process, you go to the High Court. But any dispute that you a Chapter 9 dispute, eventually is going to end up in the tax court. And what Section 129 says is, it says that if you are disputing an assessment, the onus of proof is on you to prove the assessment is wrong. And if you are disputing a decision, the onus of proof is on you to prove that the decision was wrong. So now think about this. Let's say you object and you are steadfast and headstrong, and you're going to say, well, it's an assessment, and it's whether it's a penalty assessment or not, regardless, we're going to go through and object. Fine. Then ultimately you're going to end up in the tax court having to prove the assessment wrong. The assessment to the penalty is wrong. Now, if you paid the VAT late, and SARS imposes a penalty for late payment of VAT, then the VAT is paid late. You're not going to succeed in proving the imposition or the assessment wrong. However, if you are disputing the decision not to remit, so first you do an RFR and then you object to the decision not to remit, if that objection is disallowed, you go and appeal, then in the tax court, the onus is going to be on you to prove that the decision not to remit is incorrect. And that is an entirely different story, because now you can show there was reasonable grounds and it was a first incidence of non-compliance. If you're going to end up in the tax court trying to prove that SARS incorrectly imposed a penalty when you paid it late, well, good luck. The correct procedure, according to my interpretation of the law, is if it's a late payment penalty, do the RFR. The RFR, if it's disallowed and it's decided not to remit, then you go an objection and follow the process. If SARS is preventing you from doing that, and then telling you must object, and then telling you must do this and that and the other thing, then they are preventing you from exercising a right that's given to you in the Constitution, and you shouldn't let them boss you around like that. There are ways that you can deal with that, and as I said before, depending on the circumstances, threatening with High Court action seems to work. I've had other matters where and I understand, the quantum isn't always enough to justify a High Court application. But then I've had matters where it's, well, okay, fine, it's not that urgent, it's a small amount, it's still wrong, but the Ombudsman should help. And indeed, in those cases where I have referred the matter to the Ombudsman, or whether I've told the taxpayers to refer the matter to the Ombudsman, they have helped. So this issue of remittance and penalties, I don't know why it's such a big deal. It seems like some SARS officers have a entirely different approach to others. But anyway, I've given you my view.